Hi there. This day in history, September 22nd. Today I'm drinking from a coffee mug that came from the Craftsman, Steady Crafting. On his channel he did some videos about Dark Vader. Here's the other side. That's actually his logo there with the SC, Steady Crafting. He does some pretty interesting stuff with crafty things. Not any one craft exclusively, but he's a lot of fun to watch. And that's what he looks like right there, pretty much. I mean, that's a drawing, but that's what he looks like. Well, he doesn't always wear that hat, but you check it out. I'll put a link in the description. You check out that Craftsman. I think you'll enjoy him. I ordered this from him because I like coffee mugs, and that purchase helped support the Craftsman. So, September 22nd, this day in history. We'll see if I can get through this intro without busting into tears. September 22nd is my mama's birthday, except she's not here anymore. I can't call her and sing happy birthday to her the way I always like to do. She passed away a few years ago, the day after one of my granddaughters was born. So happy birthday, Mama. Mama loved hummingbirds and cardinals and fresh flowers in the house. And I love those things too. And I'm sure my sisters do, and my daddy as well. More than anything else, though, she loved my daddy. My mama did. And that's a powerful thing. She sure did love my daddy. Well, let's get on with this day in history, beginning in the year 1290. 1290, with the birthday of Bilbo Baggins, fictional main character of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. This is by Shire reckoning. You just never know what you're going to find out on this show. 1776, American Captain Nathan Hale was hanged as a spy by the British in New York City. Wow, that was fast. They just caught him. They just arrested him yesterday, and they're hanging him today. Well, his last words were said to have been, "My only regret is that I only have one life to give for my country." What a man, Nathan Hale. In 1789, the U.S. Post Office was established. In 1791, English scientists who contributed to the study of electromagnetism and electrochemistry, Michael Faraday, was born on this day in Newington Butts, England. He was the third of four children in a family that struggled to get by. I would say they were poor, but their dad did have a job most of the time, but they had a hard time making ends meet. And so his education was only basic. He had the most basic of educations. And when he was old enough then, he got an apprenticeship with a bookbinder. He took that opportunity to read many of the books they were working on, and he developed a particular interest in science. He's known for Faraday's law of induction, the Faraday effect, the Faraday cage, lines of force, and several other theories, concepts, and principles. Michael Faraday was brilliant. Happy birthday, Michael Faraday. In 1792, the origin of the French Republican era. In 1828, Shaka Zulu was assassinated. Shaka was the founder of the Zulu Kingdom of Southern Africa, and he was murdered by his two half-brothers, Dingane and Malangana, after Shaka's mental illness threatened to destroy the Zulu tribe. This is an interesting story, and there's quite a bit more to it, so I'll post a link directly to this story in the description below. He really did go crazy, and it was about to be the end of the Zulu tribe. So check it out. If you're interested in that sort of thing, check it out. In 1862, on this day, President Abraham Lincoln issued a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, which set a date for the freedom of more than 3 million black slaves in the United States, and recast the Civil War as a fight against slavery. He called for all slaves within the rebel states to be freed on January 1st, a political move that helped keep the British from intervening on the side of the South. In 1869, Richard Wagner's opera, Das Rheingold, is heard for the first time on this date in 1869. The first of four musical works of art that constitute Wagner's Der Ring des Nibelungen, Das Rheingold, was played at the National Theater in Munich along with three other musical dramas, and I will translate those: The Valkyrie, Siegfried, and Twilight of the Gods, translated to English since I had such difficulty with the German. In 1869, the Cincinnati Red Stockings, the first professional baseball team, arrived in San Francisco after a rollicking barnstorming tour of the West. Baseball players likes to have them some fun. In 1893, Charles and Frank Duryea showed off the first American automobile produced for sale to the public by taking it on a maiden run through the streets of Springfield, Massachusetts. In 1903, the ice cream cone was patented. In 1906, race riots in Atlanta, Georgia left 21 people dead. In 1914, in the North Sea, the German U-9 submarine sank 3 British cruisers in just over 1 hour. In 1919, President Woodrow Wilson abandoned his national tour to support the League of Nations when he suffered a case of nervous exhaustion. In 1945, President Harry Truman accepted U.S. Secretary of War Stinson's recommendation to designate the war World War II. In 1947, a Douglas C-54 Skymaster made the first automatic pilot flight over the Atlantic. In 1927, Tom Lasorda, affectionately known as Tommy Lasorda, baseball manager, was born in Norristown, Pennsylvania. In 1953, on this date, the first 4-level or stack interchange in the world opened up in Los Angeles, California, of course, where else, at the intersection of Harbor, Hollywood, Pasadena, and Santa Ana freeways. Yikes. When the iconic Hollywood, Harbor, Pasadena, Santa Ana 4-level was born, it was the most expensive half-mile of highway in the world, costing $5.5 million to build. Today, highway engineers estimate that $5.5 million would pay for about 250 feet of urban freeway. In 1958, Italian tenor, songwriter, and producer Andrea Bocelli was born in Lajatico, Italy. In 1960, the Mali Federation becomes Mali. Earlier in the year, Senegal had opted out of the Mali Federation, allowing the Federation to take on the name of Mali. And that's M-A-L-I, not M-O-L-L-I-E, Mali. In 1961, President John Kennedy signed a congressional act establishing the Peace Corps. In 1964, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. premiered. In 1968, Zond 5 completed its flight. In 1970, President Richard Nixon signed a bill giving the District of Columbia representation in the U.S. Congress. In 1975, Sarah Jane Moore attempted to assassinate U.S. President Gerald Ford, the second attempt on his life in less than 3 weeks. FBI informant Sarah Jane Moore's attempt to assassinate the president in San Francisco failed due to a faulty gun and the efforts of ex-FBI agent Oliver Sipple, who tackled her. In 1979, the American-run Vela satellite detects a series of bright flashes over the Indian Ocean. The flashes were thought to be associated with atmospheric nuclear explosions. Some experts theorize that they were caused by joint Israeli and South African nuclear exercises. The governments of both countries denied this, and to date it has not been confirmed whether the flashes were indeed nuclear explosions, nor who was responsible for them. In 1980, Iran-Iraq War begins with Iraq invading Iran. It is thought to be one of the 20th century's deadliest and longest conventional wars. It ended 7 years later with no decisive victory and massive losses, both in terms of human lives and in terms of economy to both sides. In 1985, the first Farm Aid concert took place in Champaign, Illinois. It started with an offhand remark made by Bob Dylan during his performance at Live Aid, the massive fundraising concert held at Wembley Stadium in London and JFK Stadium in Pennsylvania in the early summer of 1985. Television viewers around the world phoned in donations in support of African famine relief, and Dylan said from the stage, "I hope that some of the money, maybe they could just take a little bit of it, maybe, 1 or 2 million maybe, and use it, say, to pay the mortgages of some of the farms and the farmers here that they owe to the banks." This deeply annoyed the Live Aid organizer Bob Geldof, who criticized Dylan for his remarks, but it planted a seed with several fellow musicians who shared his concern over the state of the American family farm. Less than 1 month later, Willie Nelson, Neil Young, and John Mellencamp announced plans for Farm Aid, a benefit concert for America's farmers held in Champaign, Illinois on September 22, 1985. There have been more Farm Aid concerts in the intervening years, with involvement by such greats as Hoyt Axton, Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, Emmylou Harris, Waylon Jennings, Loretta Lynn, Joni Mitchell, and Charley Pride. As soon as I read in the paper that there was going to be such a thing, Sammy Hagar told MTV's cameras on the day of the show, I called my manager and said, "I want to do it." And he said, "It's all country." I said, "I don't care. It's America. I want to do it." If there was anything more surprising than hearing Hagar perform his hard rock anthem, "I Can't Drive 55, on the same stage that had earlier featured the more quiet folk of Arlo Guthrie, it was hearing Lou Reed perform Walk on the Wild Side on a stage that had featured John Denver. Over the years since its first charity concert on this day in 1985, the Farm Aid organization has raised upwards of $35 million to support small farmers, promote sustainable farming practices, and encourage consumption of good food from family farms. American composer Irving Berlin died on this day in 1989. 1991, Huntington Library made the Dead Sea Scrolls available to the public for the first time. On September 22, 1994, the television sitcom Friends, about 6 young adults living in New York City, debuted on NBC. The show, which featured a group of relatively unknown actors, went on to become a huge hit and air for 10 seasons. It also propelled the cast, Jennifer Aniston, Courtney Cox, Lisa Kudrow, Matt LeBlanc, Matthew Perry, and David Schwimmer, to varying degrees of stardom and success in Hollywood. On this day in 2015, the American baseball player and manager Yogi Berra passed away. But we're going to end on a happy note by talking about Yogi's life. What a guy. Lawrence Peter Yogi Berra was born Lorenzo Pietro Berra in a primarily Italian neighborhood of St. Louis called The Hill. He was an American professional baseball catcher who later took on the roles of manager and coach. He played 19 seasons in Major League Baseball, and all but the last of those were for the New York Yankees. He was an 18-time All-Star and won 10 World Series championships as a player, more than any other player in MLB history. Berra had a career batting average of .285 while hitting 358 home runs and 1,430 runs batted in. He's one of only 5 players to win the American League Most Valuable Player award 3 times. He's widely regarded as one of the greatest catchers in baseball history and was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1972. I got to meet Yogi when I lived in Cooperstown, and indeed, he is quite a delightful character. Besides baseball, he's known for his quirky sayings known as yogiisms. Yogiisms have been described as distilled bits of wisdom which, like good country songs and old John Wayne movies, get to the truth in a hurry. For example, 90% of baseball is mental, the other half is physical. On why he no longer went to Ragazzi's, a St. Louis restaurant, he said, "Nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. It ain't over till it's over." He said this in July of 1973 when his Mets were trailing the Chicago Cubs by 9.5 games in the National League East. The Mets rallied to clinch the division title in their second-to-last game of the regular season and eventually reached the World Series. When giving directions to Joe Garagiola to his New Jersey home, which was accessible by 2 routes, he said, "When you come to the fork in the road, take it." Is deja vu all over again? He explained that this quote originated when he witnessed Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris repeatedly hitting back-to-back home runs in the Yankees seasons in the early 60s. He said, "You can observe a lot by watching. A nickel ain't worth a dime anymore. If you can't imitate him, don't copy him. Always go to other people's funerals, otherwise they won't go to yours." And maybe my favorite, and I actually heard him say this, I really didn't say everything I said. Yogi Berra, what a guy. Thank you so much for watching. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. And feel free to share this video if you found it interesting. As always, I'll put links to my source material in the description below. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Come on now, you can do it. You can do it. I know you can do it. Good girl. Good girl. Okay. Alrighty. I really did have to look up the pronunciation to this. Let's see if I can say it without looking again. Wagner's Der Ring des Nibelungen. I'm going to have to read it. Richard Opera's Wagner work. Italian tenor, songwriter, producer. Take a walk on the wild side. Thank goodness for editing. Don't make me squeak that pig again. Momma.